For a little over 3 years, I worked as an overnight security guard at a suburban shopping mall. When I first applied for the job, I didn't even know the position was new. The mall had gone decades without any overnight security. Once the stores closed, the place was basically left alone until morning. That changed when vandalism started becoming a serious problem. At first, it was small things, graffiti on the outer walls, trash scattered around the entrances, broken light fixtures in the parking lot. But then it escalated. Windows were smashed. Store signs were damaged. Someone even tried prying open one of the jewelry shops. So management decided it was cheaper to hire one guard than to keep paying for repairs. That guard was me. Most nights were painfully uneventful. I'd start my shift just after the mall closed. Once the last employees left and the automatic doors locked, the entire property became mine to watch. I'd spend most of the night slowly driving through the massive parking lot in a beat-up security vehicle, listening to the radio to stay awake. Every once in a while, I'd have to deal with skateboarders who liked using the empty lot as a playground. Sometimes I'd see a suspicious car parked too long near the building and have to check it out. But 90% of the time, nothing happened. Inside the mall, everything felt frozen in time. Mannequins stood motionless behind glass. Food court menus glowed faintly under dim emergency lighting. The silence was so deep that even my footsteps echoed. About 3 months into the job, something happened that shook me more than any vandal or trespasser ever had. It was just after 2 a.m. I was doing my usual loop around the outside of the building when I noticed a light on inside the mall. One of the stores near the east entrance was fully lit. That immediately set off alarms in my head. I hadn't seen anyone enter the mall. The entrances were locked, and no store employees were scheduled to be there overnight. I parked the car and went inside. As I approached the store, I listened carefully, expecting to hear movement. Drawers opening, hangers clinking, footsteps. But there was nothing. The store was completely silent. When I reached the front, my confusion deepened. The security gate was still pulled down and locked. Only store owners and mall management had access to those gates. There was no sign of forced entry. No broken locks. No damage at all. The lights were on, but the store was sealed. I stood there for a while, scanning the interior through the metal gate. Clothing racks sat perfectly still. Displays were untouched. There wasn't a single sign that anyone had been inside. There wasn't much I could do. I couldn't access the store, and there was no evidence of crime. Eventually, I convinced myself that an employee must have forgotten to turn off the lights before closing. I went back to my patrol. About an hour later, as I circled the opposite side of the mall, I saw another light on. Different store. Same situation. My stomach tightened. I went back inside and approached cautiously. Again, no sounds. No movement. The security gate was locked just like before. This time, I grabbed the gate and shook it hard. If someone was hiding inside, I wanted them to know they'd been noticed. Nothing happened. I turned to leave. That's when I heard a click. I spun around. The light inside the store went off. At first, I thought maybe it was on a timer. But then something caught my eye. For just a split second, I was almost certain I saw movement behind the counter, like someone ducking down to hide. My heart started racing. I stood frozen, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. I should mention that I was severely sleep-deprived at the time. I'd barely slept over the past 2 days. That became my excuse for everything that followed. I raised my flashlight and scanned the inside the store. Nothing. No people. No shadows moving. No signs of life. I let out a breath and shook my head. Then I heard another click behind me. This time, it came from farther down the hallway. I turned slowly. A third store's light had just turned off. And this time, I know what I saw. There was someone standing inside. They were right next to the light switch. Tall. Still. Facing toward the gate. My throat went dry. I raised my voice, trying to sound confident. "You can leave with me," I said, "or you can leave with the police." The figure didn't move. I took a step closer and shined my flashlight directly toward where I'd seen them standing. There was no one there. Instead, I noticed a clothing rack positioned near the wall. The hanging clothes were swaying slightly, as if they'd just been disturbed. I told myself the shadows must have lined up perfectly. That exhaustion had played tricks on my brain. That explanation was the only thing that kept me from panicking. I finished my shift without further incident, but I was deeply unsettled. For months after that night, nothing strange happened. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it. Until winter came. Nearly a year into the job, I was assigned indoor patrols more often due to freezing temperatures. The mall owners also had me checking pipes in maintenance areas to save money. One night, while inside, I headed toward the restroom. As soon as I stepped in, I heard a toilet flush. I jumped. The mall was closed. I was supposed to be alone. I reminded myself that the toilets were motion-activated and sometimes malfunctioned. I checked every stall. Empty. Afterward, I sat down in one of them, scrolling through my phone to pass the time. That's when I heard tapping. It was coming from a stall next to mine. I looked down and saw a pair of shoes standing there, facing toward me. Slowly, I raised my eyes above the stall wall. A man was standing there. He was impossibly tall, his head nearly touching the ceiling, staring straight down at me. Time seemed to stop. The second he realized I saw him, he ducked back down out of sight. I kicked open the stall door and rushed into the neighboring stall. It was empty, except for the shoes. They were positioned exactly where I'd seen them. I didn't finish my shift that night. I left. To this day, I still don't know what I saw inside that mall. But I know one thing for certain. I was never truly alone during those overnight shifts. I've been working overnight security at the mall for nearly a year by the time this happened. By then, I thought I understood the place. I knew which doors rattled when the wind picked up, which lights flickered for no reason, and which hallways felt colder than the others, even with the heat running. Most importantly, I thought I understood when I was alone. Winter had settled in hard that year. Snow piled up along the edges of the parking lot, and the mall owners didn't want to deal with frozen pipes. To save money, they added maintenance checks to my nightly duties. Along with patrolling for vandals, I now had to inspect restrooms, utility closets, and back hallways. I didn't love it, but it beat being outside in the freezing wind all night. That night was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes every sound feel louder than it should be. My boots echoed off the tile as I walked through the mall's interior corridors, flashlight in hand, radio clipped to my belt. Most of the stores were dark behind locked metal gates. Mannequins stood frozen in mid-pose, their glossy faces catching the faint glow of emergency lights. The food court smelled faintly of grease and cleaning chemicals, like it always did after closing. Around 3:30 a.m., I felt nature calling. The nearest restroom was near the old movie theater wing, one of the least used parts of the mall, even during the day. I hesitated for a moment before heading that way. Something about that wing always made me uneasy. Still, I was tired, cold, and just wanted to get it over with. As soon as I stepped inside the restroom, I heard a toilet flush. I physically jumped. My heart spiked, and my hand instinctively tightened around my flashlight. The mall was closed. I was supposed to be the only person inside. I stood perfectly still, listening. No footsteps, no voices, just the low hum of the lights overhead. I reminded myself that the toilets were motion-activated. Sometimes they flushed on their own if the sensors glitched or picked up movement from air currents. Trying to calm myself down, I started checking the stalls. One by one, I pushed them open. Empty. All of them. No trash. No signs of recent use. Nothing out of place. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Satisfied there was no one else in the restroom, I finally went into one of the stalls myself. I locked the door and sat down, pulling my phone out of my pocket. I queued up a YouTube video and let it play softly, just loud enough to break the silence. That's when I heard it. A tapping sound. At first, it was faint, so faint that I thought it might be coming from my phone speaker or echoing from somewhere else in the building. Tap, tap, tap. It was rhythmic, intentional. I paused the video. The tapping continued. It was coming from the stall next to mine. I felt a wave of unease wash over me. Slowly, I leaned forward and looked down at the floor beneath the divider. There was a pair of shoes in the neighboring stall. They were positioned neatly, toes pointing directly toward my stall. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard anyone walk in. The restroom door hadn't opened. There were no footsteps, no sound of a stall door unlocking. I told myself maybe someone had entered while I was distracted by my phone. Still, something felt wrong. The tapping stopped. For several long seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then, very slowly, I lifted my eyes. Above the stall divider, a head appeared. It belonged to the tallest man I had ever seen. He was standing upright, his shoulders hunched slightly to avoid hitting the ceiling. His face was pale under the harsh restroom lighting, and his eyes were fixed directly on me. He wasn't blinking. He wasn't smiling. He was just staring. I froze. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to move, to run, to do anything, but I couldn't. I felt like a prey animal caught in a spotlight. The moment his eyes met mine, his expression changed. Not to fear, not to surprise, but to something colder. And then, just as slowly as he had appeared, he ducked back down beneath the divider. I snapped out of it. I jumped to my feet, so fast I nearly slipped, kicked open my stall door, and rushed into the neighboring one. It was empty. No man, no movement, no sound, just the stall and the shoes. They were still there, placed exactly where I had seen them moments earlier. I stared at them, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I crouched down and touched one of them. Cold, as if no one had been wearing them at all. I didn't investigate further. I didn't call out. I didn't radio for backup. I bolted. I ran out of the restroom, down the hallway, and all the way back to my patrol car. My hands were shaking so badly I struggled to unlock the door. I sat inside with the engine running, trying to slow my breathing. The clock on the dashboard read 4:02 a.m. I spent the rest of my shift parked in the lot, watching the building from a distance. Nothing else happened that night. When my shift finally ended, I went home and slept for almost 12 hours straight. For days afterward, I told myself it had been exhaustion, stress, a hallucination brought on by lack of sleep. Eventually, I started believing it, until it happened again. About 2 weeks later, I was assigned indoor patrol once more. This time, I avoided the restroom near the movie theater wing. I used one closer to the main entrance instead. Everything was normal. Too normal. I finished my patrol and was heading back toward the exit when my radio crackled to life. Static, then silence. Then, faintly, I heard breathing. I lifted the radio closer to my ear. "Hello," I said. No response. Just breathing. Slow, deep, uncomfortably close. I clicked the radio off and tried to convince myself it was interference. That was when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy ones, measured. I turned around, flashlight raised. The hallway was empty, but the restroom door behind me, the one near the theater wing, was slowly swinging open. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. Eventually, I backed away and left the building. After that, I requested a transfer to daytime shifts. I told management I couldn't handle nights anymore. They didn't argue. A month later, I quit. To this day, I don't use public restrooms late at night if I can avoid it. And whenever I hear a toilet flush in an empty building, I leave. I was 19 years old when this happened. At that age, fear doesn't work the way it should. You believe you're smarter than danger, faster than consequences, and somehow immune to the worst-case scenarios adults warn you about. That mindset is the only reason my friend and I went into that mall. The place was called Rolling Acres Mall. It had been abandoned for years, shut down after store closures, crime issues, and failed redevelopment plans. During the day, it looked sad. Empty parking lots, cracked signage, dead fountains filled with trash. At night, it looked like something else entirely. I went with my friend Jake. That's not his real name, but it's close enough. We've been friends since middle school, both into urban exploration, abandoned places, and anything that gave us an adrenaline rush. It was a Wednesday night. No school the next day. Nothing to do. So around 11 p.m., we drove out to the mall. The parking lot was massive and completely empty. Not a single other car in sight. The building loomed ahead of us, its dark windows reflecting the moonlight like black glass. Jake had heard about a side entrance that had been jammed open by previous explorers. Sure enough, we found it. A metal service door near the loading docks had been forced inward. It creaked softly as we pushed it open. Inside, the darkness was absolute. I don't mean dim. I mean pitch black, like the kind of darkness that swallows sound. We stood there for a moment before even turning on our flashlights. Just listening. Nothing. No wind. No dripping water. No distant traffic noise. Just silence. We clicked our flashlights on and stepped inside. The beam illuminated a wide corridor lined with closed stores. Metal gates were pulled down. Signs hung crooked. Dust coated everything. Our footsteps echoed louder than expected, bouncing off the high ceilings. We explored the lower level first, sticking close together. The air was stale and smelled faintly of mold and old food court grease. Some stores still had mannequins inside, frozen in outdated clothing, their plastic faces catching the light at the wrong angles. After about 20 minutes, we reached one of the old escalators. It was dead, of course, rusted, stuck halfway down. We climbed it carefully, gripping the rails. The second level felt worse. The ceiling was lower, the corridors narrower, the darkness heavier. That's when we heard it. A loud bang. It echoed from somewhere down the upper level, metal slamming against metal. I froze. Jake stopped too. We looked at each other. You think that's security? I whispered. Jake shook his head. Doubt it. Probably other people like us. That didn't make me feel better. Still, we decided to head in the opposite direction, just in case. As we moved, we kept our flashlights trained low, trying not to draw attention. We were near what used to be a JCPenney when it happened again. Another bang. This one was louder. Closer. It echoed down the hallway and vibrated through the floor. Jake didn't say anything this time. Without speaking, we both turned off our flashlights. The darkness swallowed us instantly. I could barely see my own hands. We started moving quietly, one step at a time, trying not to scrape our shoes against the floor or bump into anything. That's when I heard it. A voice. It was faint and muffled, like someone whispering through thick fabric. At first, I couldn't make out what it was saying. Then I realized it was my name. I stopped walking. Jake should have been right beside me. I whispered his name back. No response. I heard the voice again, closer this time. I assumed it was Jake messing with me. He had that kind of humor. So I followed the sound. Carefully. Slowly. The voice kept repeating my name, always just ahead of me. When I reached out, my hand touched what I thought was Jake's shoulder. Relief washed over me for half a second. Then I noticed something wrong. The jacket. Jake was wearing a thin hoodie that night. The fabric under my fingers was thicker, rougher. My stomach dropped. I turned on my flashlight. I screamed. The person I was touching wasn't Jake. He was tall, much taller than me. He wore a dark beanie pulled low and a face mask covering everything but his eyes. Those eyes were wide and alert. Before I could react, he grabbed me. His arm locked around my neck, cutting off my air as he started dragging me backward into the darkness. I kicked and struggled, but panic made my movements clumsy. That's when Jake came out of nowhere. He charged from his side and landed a hard punch straight into the man's face. The grip loosened just enough. I broke free and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't check on Jake. I just ran. I followed the hallway, my flashlight shaking wildly, my lungs burning. I didn't even know if I was heading toward the exit. I just knew I couldn't stop. After what felt like forever, I heard Jake behind me. We ran together, down the escalator, across the lower level, and straight toward the service door we'd entered through. We burst outside into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I reached the car. Jake jumped in, slammed the door, and started the engine. He floored it. We didn't say a word until the mall was far behind us. Only then did we pull over. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Jake's knuckles were scraped and bleeding. We sat there in silence for a long time. Finally, Jake spoke. He wasn't alone. I felt my chest tighten. Jake told me that just before he punched the man, he saw movement deeper in the hallway. More than one shape. Watching. We never reported it. We never went back. And I never explored abandoned buildings again. Because whatever was inside that mall that night, it wasn't just empty space. I used to work overnight at a small 24/7 general store located inside a mall in South Carolina. During the day, it was just another forgettable shop. Snacks, drinks, lottery tickets, a little bit of everything. But at night, it felt completely out of place, like it didn't belong there anymore. The mall itself closed around 9:30 p.m. Once the last shoppers left, metal security gates came down across every store entrance. The lights dimmed to a low, yellowish glow meant only for security cameras and overnight guards. Except for us. Our store stayed open all night. There were two ways in. One entrance opened directly into the mall's main hallway. The other was a back door that led outside to the parking lot. Every night at 9:30, part of my routine was lowering the metal gate between our store and the mall. That gate was the only thing separating me from the dark, empty corridors beyond. Once it was down, the store felt like an island. The night shifts were usually boring, painfully boring. Between midnight and 5 a.m., maybe 2 or 3 customers would come in, usually truck drivers, night shift workers, or someone desperate for cigarettes. Most of the time, I just clean shelves, restock, or lean on the counter fighting sleep. I worked alone. No security guard stationed nearby. No manager on site. Just me, a phone behind the counter, and a vague idea that mall security was somewhere watching cameras. That detail would matter later. One night, about halfway through my shift, something finally happened. I was organizing shelves near the front of the store when I heard a rattling sound. Metal scraping against metal. I froze. The sound came from the gate, the one separating the store from the closed mall. I looked up. A man was standing on the other side of the gate. He had both hands wrapped around the bars, gently shaking them back and forth. At first, I assumed he was mall security. I'd never actually seen him walking around at night, but it was the only explanation that made sense. I stepped closer and asked, "Is everything okay?" He didn't answer. He didn't even look at me. Instead, he was staring straight up at the ceiling. His head was tilted back at an unnatural angle, mouth slightly open, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. That's when I realized something was wrong. Mall security wore uniforms. This man didn't. He was wearing a dirty black and white plaid shirt and baggy blue jeans. His clothes looked old, worn, like he'd slept in them for days. I asked again if he needed help. No response. He just kept staring upward and gently shaking the gate. I felt my stomach tighten. There was supposed to be a protocol for situations like this. Call mall security, use an intercom, alert someone. The problem was no one had ever shown me how. I didn't know what number to call. I didn't know where the intercom was. I didn't even know if the phone behind the counter could reach security. So I did the only thing I could think of. I backed away. I returned to the register behind the counter, putting as much distance between us as possible. Unfortunately, the store layout worked against me. The shelves were arranged at an angle, meaning from where I stood, the man at the gate was still in my direct line of sight. I tried not to look at him. I focused on cleaning. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him finally start to move. He backed away from the gate, slowly, still staring up at the ceiling. He didn't turn around. He didn't blink. He just drifted backward into the darkness of the mall hallway until I couldn't see him anymore. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just a mentally unwell person who somehow got locked inside before closing. I moved on with my shift. About an hour later, I heard the back door slide open. A customer. I was between 2 aisles at the time, restocking shelves, so I didn't see them enter. I finished sweeping and walked back toward the counter. That's when I saw him. He was standing at the end of the alcohol aisle, looking up. At first, I thought he was scanning the top shelf. I looked away for just a second, long enough to put the broom behind the counter. When I looked back up, he was staring directly at me, smiling. Not a grin, a wide, stretched smile that showed no warmth at all. That's when I recognized him. It was the same man from the gate. Only now, he wasn't wearing the plaid shirt, just a plain undershirt, meaning he had found a way into the store. My heart slammed against my ribs. We stared at each other in silence. I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 30, but it felt endless. His eyes didn't blink. His smile never changed. There was something deeply wrong about it, like his face was doing the wrong expression for the situation. I finally tried to speak. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking, "or I'm calling the cops." He didn't move, didn't react, didn't even breathe differently. That's when panic took over. I ran. I bolted into the back room and slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I called my manager. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. That's when I heard it. A tap. Not a knock. Just a single, gentle tap on the back room door. My blood went cold. I held my breath. Another tap. Slow. Deliberate. Like he knew exactly where I was standing on the other side. I crouched down behind some boxes, trying not to make a sound. Minutes passed. 5. Maybe more. The tapping stopped. Eventually, fear of losing my job, of him stealing everything while I hid, pushed me to move. I unlocked the door and stepped back into the store. The aisles were empty. The man was gone. When my shift ended, I told my manager everything and showed her the security footage. She went pale. The cameras showed him shaking the gate. Then nothing. No footage of him entering the store. No back door opening. No broken locks. He simply appeared in the alcohol aisle. I quit a month later. I still don't know how he got in. And I don't shop at malls late at night anymore.